Hi, it's time for a chime video. So this is a NuTone model CH4000. It's from probably the early or mid 1950s. And I've done a couple other videos about this type of chiming clock. In this video you should watch up above where those little tags pop up to take you to other videos if you want to learn more about something like this. This is going to be a multi-part series where we're going to rebuild this and make it work again. Before we get into part one here, let's make one thing perfectly clear. This is not a door chime, and this is not a chiming door chime clock. This is not a door chime at all. This is a standalone, plug-in-the-wall NuTone clock with a chime. It has nothing to do with door chimes at all. It's a unique and unusual product they only made for a short amount of time. We'll get more into the unusual features about how it chimes as we go along. That'll be in a future part when we're talking about that. The scope of the project is I actually own 3 of these. I have one that's complete in really almost perfect condition. It doesn't work because it's old and I've never done any work on it. The second one, this is the second one. The second one is complete except the case is in really bad shape. The crest is broken off here. It's missing its 3 finials. The columns have a lot of gouges and things in them. The case is just in really bad shape. However, everything's inside, which is good. And no, it doesn't work because someone's monkeyed around with it and everything's been disconnected and it's kind of a jumble inside. The third one that I have, number 3, is a complete case in really nearly perfect condition, but it's got no guts in it. There's no chiming mechanism. In fact, someone has removed the NuTone clock assembly and put one of those little battery-powered quartzy kind of clocks in it that takes a AA battery, and it doesn't even have the right hands on it. The scope of the project is to disassemble this one, repair and restore the mechanisms, the clock and the chime, back to working condition, and then we're going to do a CH4000 transplant, and we're going to put the parts from this one into case number 3, which is in nearly perfect condition, and in the end I'll end up with 2 of them, one that's original that doesn't work and another one that's all original in quotes, but it does work. And that's the scope of the project. This one is serial number 1802 and it's on the label inside the door. And so part number 1 is going to be, we're going to disassemble all of this. This will probably be 6 or 7 parts altogether. We'll just have to wait and see how it goes. I've stopped predicting how many parts videos are going to be because you just never know. So let's go ahead and get to it, and I'll explain what we're doing as we go along and what we're taking out and a little background if I can think of something interesting to say, but let's get to it and get it taken apart. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to take the mechanism out of the inside of the case, the chiming mechanism. So to do that, the way it's held in is, it's almost barely held in because you can see it's kind of flopping around. But it is held on with 2 screws at the bottom, and there's supposed to be 1 screw up here at the top that holds it, and that's kind of missing, so it's kind of flopping around. But to get this out, we have to unscrew the screws from the bottom of the chiming mechanism. And to do that, we have to lay it down. And I'm going to prop it up a little bit so you can see. So on the bottom is this metal mesh, like screen. I believe that was probably put on there to allow the sound to come out better. Otherwise, it's got to make its way through the wooden case, and that's going to mute the sound quite a bit. It's held in place with 4 little screws in the corners, and what we're going to do with our screws, we're going to put them in a metal cup because we don't want to lose them. This one actually only has 3 of the 4 screws because, like I say, somebody has monkeyed around with this one before. Probably made an attempt to fix it or figure it out, didn't, gave up, whatever, and there it sat. So if we take out the 4 screws, or 3 screws in this case, normally there should be 4, and now the screen comes out. So we'll put all the parts away carefully because of course we have to put it back together at the end. Behind the screen there's a screw here and a screw here, and they go through the wooden case, there's a cutout here, into the base of the chime mechanism. So if we undo these are brass bevel-headed, slotted machine screws. I'll take that one out. And there's number 2. And once we have those out, then we can lift the chime mechanism out. So all you really have to do is reach inside. It's kind of heavy a little bit, and angle it up, and out it comes, and we'll just put it over here for a second. The next thing we have to do is we have to take the clock. You can't see that. We have to take the clock off the back of the door, and that's the next thing to do, because I really want to get the case off the workbench because it's kind of big and it's in the way. So this is the clock mechanism on the back of the door. The clock mechanism, the aluminum colored part, has the motor on the back of it, and then this is mounted onto this square metal plate that's got the labels and things on it, and it's held onto the back of the door with 8 little screws that screw into the back of the wooden door. So if we take the little screws out carefully and put them in the cup. If you're missing screws, one of the things I can tell you is these are very small little slotted oval-headed wood screws, and they're probably about a ½ an inch long. You have to be careful. These kind of screws are used in other NuTone chimes, and if you're missing screws and you run down to your local hardware store to get some, make sure you don't get them that are too long, because then when you tighten them down, they'll poke through the front of the door or front of the chime cover, and it becomes damaged and unsightly, and you don't really want to know why I know that. Alright, so once you take the 8 screws out, this lifts away and the clock mechanism comes out as an assembly. The other part in the door is the glass. Now, the other case that I have has glass in it, but this one's in perfectly good shape, needs to be cleaned up. It's got a lot of smudges and stuff on it, and as you can kind of see, it's kind of oval shaped, or it's curved on the edges. I don't know in the world of clocks what you call this exactly, the shape. It is square, and it's, I don't know, curved, or it's not beveled. I guess it's curved. I'd have to ask my friend Marv, the clock guy, because he knows everything about clocks. So what we end up with is an empty case. No clock, broken crest, no finials, columns. Columns aren't horrible. Now, at this point, we have a dilemma, because while this has no real value as a whole because it's damaged and it's not in good shape, and now all of the parts have been taken out of it, I always feel kind of bad about throwing anything away like this, because somebody might need some part of this one day. It does have the glass panel in the bottom of the door. That's still good. The door itself is fine. It's got the little knob here and the little latch here. And actually the columns are kind of nice. They're a nice tapered column, and actually if you took these out, you probably could flip them around and put the sort of gouged up side in the back where you don't see them so much. It's always hard to know what to do. I can't save everything in the world, but sometimes you can save some of it. What we're going to do, I think, and I pretty much just decided this right this second, is let's go ahead and take the screws out of the door hinges. Because that's pretty easy. And these, put it in a little parts bag, the screws. And I think I'll keep, at least for the time being, I'll keep the door and the screws, because it's not very big, it's not very thick, it doesn't take up that much room. And of course we should take the latch off, I think, because maybe someone will see this video and have one of these that's got a door problem, and then maybe we can give them a door. That would be good. Now the other thing I like about these, the broken case kind of ruins the whole thing, but the columns are kind of nice. The columns, they're kind of wiggly. You can't see that, but I can. So let's see if maybe we could carefully disassemble slightly. We're not going to bash it. It's not too much. It's not one of those home improvement shows where they show up on the first day and everybody's got a sledgehammer and they go crazy. My father was in construction, and I can tell you that those kind of things rarely ever happen. Alright, so now we have a pair of columns that can go with the door. That's kind of good. It's interesting that you can see the columns are held in place with little nails, which is kind of cool. I assume somebody had to actually drive the nails in to do that. And the case itself is actually made out of mahogany veneered plywood. So I don't think there's much value in the rest of this. I don't have any real sentimental attachments to this. There is this little hook on the back here, and I think the purpose of that was, I suppose you could hang it on the wall if you wanted to, or maybe it was to connect it to the wall so if you had an earthquake it didn't tip over off the hutch or wherever it was sitting. We'll put that in the parts bag. And then the last thing that would be kind of nice to keep, it's got the metal NuTone badge on the back. And I think just for its own sake, it needs to be saved. Because I did go through the trouble of having a stamped metal plate made for it. And you never know. Could come in handy one day. So I don't think the rest of the case has any real value. And now I won't feel as bad when I toss it in the dumpster when I go back to the office. Since we're in the disassembly mode, we might as well disassemble a little bit of the clock just to get some of the more fragile parts out of the way. We have a nice clock face here. It does have sort of a circular scrape in it a little bit, and that's probably from where the hands were rubbing on it at some point. If it doesn't come off, I do have the clock face from chime number 3, which is the case with nothing in it, so we can always use that one. You got second hand, minute hand, hour hand, and these are just press fit onto the shaft of the clock gear drive assembly, and all you need to do to take them off is have a small flat blade screwdriver, and you just simply sort of put it underneath and you carefully wiggle it back and forth just a little bit and it'll pop off. So there's that one. The diameter of the hole in the center becomes increasingly larger as you go down the stack. And you don't want to bend these because the metal is rather thin. There's the minute hand, and then we have the hour hand, like that. So those will also go in a parts bag, like this, and be put away till the end of the project, like that, so we don't lose them. Once you take the hands off, then the clock face comes off. And then we have the clock mechanism, which is held onto the backing plate with 3 screws. We won't get to this part until it's time to work on the clock mechanism, but now this can be put away with the hands so it doesn't get damaged any more than it already is. I'm not sure. See, you can sort of see the, maybe, you can see the sort of circular scratch in it. That might come off, it might not. We'll just have to wait and see. So the last bit we're going to do today is we're going to take a quick look at the chiming Mechanism. So this is based on a NuTone Model K40 symphonic chime, and while it's very similar, it has some very subtle differences. One of the differences on this chiming clock is it has its own transformer built into it. NuTone door chimes have usually a remotely mounted transformer that powers it, and then wires run to the chime mechanism, and that's how it gets powered up. But since this has a cord and it plugs into a wall plug, it has its own transformer built into it. So we're going to take the transformer out because it's kind of big and heavy. And this tone bar is sort of falling out here. So let's see if we can get this out of the way. There we go. And there are screws with nuts on the back. We'll loosen those. And to be honest with you, I don't even know if the transformer is actually any good or not. Alright, take that out. It's got some, put those over there. It's got two wires. See, I actually didn't see that. They're on the low voltage connections on this side, and that's the side that powers the chime. So we'll loosen these screws. Like that. And now, on the side that you couldn't see, what does it actually say? I don't know if you'll be able to see that very well or not. Try to catch the light on it just right. Like that, maybe. It says 20 volt chime NuTone incorporated transformer 20 VA. So for some people who argue with me about whether these 1950s chimes are 20 volt chimes, which is what I always say, or are they 24 volt chimes, now we know. It's a real NuTone 20 volt transformer. What do you know? The other thing that's very interesting, which we now discovered, is here is a date code. Pretty sure it's a date code. It says 10 or 10J148. So this was actually made in 1948. I would have thought it was somewhat later than that, but apparently not. Or at least the base mechanism was made in 1948. When the chime was actually made, or the entire clock, when that was actually made, maybe that's up for grabs a little bit, but this is an actual NuTone date code, so 1948 seems like what we're going to go with. The other thing that's really interesting, you can tell that this was a top-of-the-line prestige product from NuTone because of the way it's finished. The base has this nice gold finish on it. You've got, of course, the solid brass resonating tubes on each side, and you also have brass tone bars. And these are not steel, and I can show you that because here's a magnet, and look, magnet falls off. Because brass is not ferrous, it's not magnetic. So these are actually solid brass tone bars. Unlike other chimes that I've shown that have tone bars that look a lot like this, but they're actually steel tone bars with like a brass wash on them to make them look fancy. They're not the actual brass tone bars. We're also, when we get into restoring the base, we're also going to talk about how the tone bars are held in place. And you can see here how easily they can wiggle. And if we just hit them a little bit, can't do this one because it fell off, but they have a really nice tone to them because they're not held on super securely. They have a lot of wiggle to them, and we're going to reproduce this when we repair this one down here, and we'll talk a little bit about that. The other thing that's interesting about this is if you look right here, this is the little terminal strip where if this was a K40 symphonic door chime, this is where the wires for the transformer and the push buttons would have been connected. But these are not actually used as push button terminals because it doesn't work that way. It's not a door chime, it's a chiming clock. But you still have the same terminal strip because I think it was an easy way for them to connect things up on this and make it go. So that's the end of part 1. Part 2 we'll probably be working on the clock next, and then part 3 we'll work on the chime base, and if everything goes well, maybe it'll only be 4 parts, probably end up being 5. Oh, I know, one more thing, we were going to test the transformer real quick, so let me power that up and show you what we got. Okay, so we've got our NuTone 20 volt AC transformer powered up on our bench power supply. It's being powered up at 112.5 volts. And you may think, well, that's kind of odd. Why is it 112.5? This is one of those things that people don't think about, but it comes into play here. So back in the day, back in 1948, most of the electrical system in the United States was running at somewhere between 110 and 115 volts. Today, because our power grid in the United States is old and outdated, there's many places where the line voltage into your house can be anywhere from 120 to maybe almost 125 volts, which is actually really hard on older products that weren't designed to run that high. To give this a fair measurement, we're going to split the difference between 110 and 115, and we'll make it 112.5. Because if you were out on the prairie in Missouri in 1948, you probably had 112.5, at least that's my guess. So we'll power it up, see if we have any smoke. Nope, no smoke, that's pretty good. We'll measure it and see what we get. So we actually have 26.7 volts, which is not 20 volts, is it? No, it's not. So we'll talk about that in a second. And just to let you actually see the numbers, 26.8. It's going to fluctuate a little bit because the more you feed in, the more it's going to come out. Now, why is it 26.8 and not 22, which is what I would have expected it to be? Normally, a free-running transformer, if it's rated for 20 volts, should be putting out somewhere between 22 and 22.5-ish volts. It varies based on the voltage that goes into it. But also you have to take into account that that's the voltage of the transformer while it's under load. Right now it's a free running transformer, and if I get my probes on there right, we're at 26.8. Now if you put it back in the chime and it's running the clock, because it's got to drive the motor that makes the hands go, and when the clock chimes, it's got to run the chime motor, and it has to run the solenoids that strike the chime. All of those things use power, and when they're using power, the voltage out of the transformer is going to drop some. Now I don't know if it's going to drop down to 20, and it actually probably shouldn't. It should be around 22, 22.5, but this is a little higher than what I would have imagined. And again, 26.8. Now, if we measure this, here's our line voltage, and if we drop this down a little bit, down to 110, see how close we can get it. There we go. 110 volts, old school line voltage, and we measure our transformer. See, we only dropped down half a volt, not that much. To get it all the way down to 22.5 volts, let's go down to 100 volts and see where we get. That's pretty close. Alright, so at 100 volts, we're getting 23.9, still almost 24. The transformer is putting out a fair amount of power above the 20 volts that's stamped on the side. Why is that the case? I don't know. That's the way they made them in those days, I guess. But if it's what was in the chime, then it's what should be appropriate, and we're not going to worry about it. So that's the end of part 1 of our CH4000 Chiming Clock repair. In part 2, we'll probably deal with the clock. I hope you found this interesting, and perhaps for someone it will be helpful. If it is, and it does, please give it a thumbs up on YouTube, because that helps us just a little bit. There'll be a banner right here that shows you how to subscribe. Go to our YouTube homepage, click on the bell, and when you click on the bell, click on it to receive all notifications, and every time we post a new video, you'll get a notification and you can watch it. That's all for today. See you on the next video.